Hirete. This is an essay that I wrote on the 2nd of April 2013, and it's called A Crisis of Faith. As you can tell, there's nothing wrong with my voice, but I've tried reading this several times, and it has led to many mistakes and a very dry throat, because it is quite long. But since it's so important, I still wish to post it, so I am going to use the freely available Microsoft Speech Platform Synthesizer to read this essay. I apologize for any inconvenience this may cause, but I do hope that it will still be understandable. If you are on Facebook, you may look me up at Magisa83, that's Magkisa83 @gmail.com, where I have also posted this note in regular text. Thank you.
I will say, before beginning, that this is one of the most difficult essays I have ever written. It forced me to examine myself and my beliefs, and to admit some very painful truths. But it is also something which has been building up for many years, and I am glad that I was able to write it and now, that I may share it with you. Perhaps, you can offer me advice, or, maybe, you have gone through something similar, in which case, this may help you. Either way, I ask you not to judge me until you have read this through to the end. I believe that I am having what my theology professor, who was a Jesuit priest, would have called a crisis of faith. Only, mine does not revolve around whether the gods are real, for I am sure this is the case. My crisis is a very personal one, part of which I described in an essay entitled Religion and Nationalism, which can also be found here on YouTube. But it's more than just that. I grew up with no religion. My family was Roman Catholic in name only. I was baptized when I was a baby. Then, at the age of 8, after most local churches said they'd call us back and never did, and one rejected me due to my blindness, I had my first and last communion out of town, and that was it. From then until the age of 19, my only beliefs were in some kind of higher power that I couldn't name, and in the spiritual realm. I began to experience the world of spirits at the age of 14, and it has remained the one true constant in my life, offering me solace in times of need, hope in times of despair, and more. I found Hellenic polytheism in December of 2002, while looking up something else Greek. I was not seeking religion of any kind. But I felt drawn to Athena, due to her love of wisdom, and the story of Arachne, that I was told years before, in school. I, too, loved weaving. I also enjoyed the story of Persephone, though since I was told it, again in school and at a young age, I didn't learn about the rape aspect until many years later. By February of 2003, I had decided to become a Hellenic polytheist. It's at this point in the story that I usually say, and I've never looked back since then, and while I haven't done so in the sense of regret or wondering what my life would have been like without the gods, I must admit a few things here. When I started out in this path, I was first aided by a woman named Druansha. She has since moved on to more New Age things, but I must always thank her and her page for welcoming me and giving me advice in those early days. I will never forget the time when I told my communion story to a Hellenic group and they said, "Do you really think the gods care if you're blind?" That touched me, and stayed with me, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly welcomed somewhere. I also had a book, Old Stones, New Temples by Drew Campbell. It contained all sorts of information on the gods, and rituals, and festivals, etc. It seemed to be just what I wanted. For a while, I was truly fascinated by our faith, and asked all sorts of questions. Then, I began to notice a lot of fighting on one of the groups, so I left. I found another one, which was far more reconstructionist in its outlook. I liked this, but by now, I was already heavily involved in my interest in rebetiko, a style of Greek music. I was also in school, having discovered the gods during my second year of college. As time passed, I began to feel less and less connected with my faith. I believed in the gods, but after my Greek and Roman mythology classes in college, I rarely read our sacred texts. I started saying a group of prayers, basically blessings for those both living and in the spiritual realm in my life, at night. These I created, and I remained diligent here for many years. But eventually, I even became lax about those. If I asked a deity for something, though, I would always try to give back, by writing a poem, hymn, or story, or by doing something in his/her name. I performed a few very small rituals asking for healing of loved ones, and a large one, on April 21, 2012, for the nation, but that was all. I don't follow our calendar, don't make sacrifice at meals, and even after 10 years of following the gods, I still don't have any kind of altar to them. At the same time, I always felt that something was missing. I wanted to be a reconstructionist, yet the true desire to do so just wasn't there. I lacked the passion and motivation necessary for it. So I tried to become active in various religious groups, hoping that I could somehow capture that inspiration. But I found more conflict, in the form of varying theologies and attitudes about the nature of the gods, how they should be worshipped, and even how they in our faith should impact our lives. I have always viewed things, religiously at least, from the Homeric and Hesiodic perspective. As I read, I became more frustrated. Not only did I find New Age eclectics, Wiccans, and fan fiction types, but also those rooted in ancient tradition, which, nonetheless, clashed with all that I thought of our religion. These included Neoplatonists, Orphics, mystics of various kinds, etc. The more I read from them, the more confused and frustrated I became. Why, I wondered, didn't they follow the old ways? But on the heels of that always came my next question. How could I accuse them of not following the old ways when I don't even read our texts or do rituals? At least they're well read. But it's constantly being said, from all sides, that Hellenic polytheism is not a religion of hard doctrines, universal texts, etc. Even though I was not brought up in a religious household, I still expected at least some of these things when I began following the gods, and the anything goes mentality first annoyed, then angered, and finally perplexed me. I cannot personally comprehend, much less agree with, the idea that we are basically many faiths under one name. It reminds me too much of the United States of America, which claims to be one country, but which has different laws in different states. The nationalist in me extends to my religion. I believe that a nation should be united, and so should the given members of a faith. Certainly, there could be different branches, but they should also have their own groups. Some have argued that this is a bad idea, since we are a small group on the whole. But to me, it makes more sense that those with similar views should band together. Yet I only know of one or two Reconstructionist groups which meet my definition of the word. It seems to me that, even though I'm not a proper Reconstructionist, the gods answer my prayers. If it really doesn't matter how we worship or what we believe, why go through the elaborate rituals, rites, etc. of our faith? In 2010, I developed an interest in the Revolution of 21 April, 1967, and in our national saviors from then as well as from the 4th of August regime 1936-41. I was already a nationalist, though I only called myself a patriot at the time. As I learned, I became a follower, and started to pay attention to Hellenic politics, which wasn't difficult, as I was already interested in them and the nation as a whole. This brought me into conflict, yet again, with many of my co-religionists, who felt that such views were wrong. I began expressing my views in these groups, sometimes at appropriate times, and sometimes not. I found that my passion for not only the revolution, but for all modern Hellenic things far outweighed my interest in the gods and in ancient Hellenic culture. The more I tried to ignore and deny it, the more I found it to be true. For one who claims to be religious, I am not as moved by the ancient texts as I should be. The thing which moves me, out of all of the books I have ever read, is the memoirs of General Macrianus. While I have only found the introduction and first chapter of the book translated into English, they can touch my soul in ways that nothing else has ever done. I feel at one with that great hero. He can bring me to the heights of joy and pride, with his patriotism, and to the depths of sadness, as I realize that what he was writing about, all those years ago, is still happening today. Likewise, when I can read and understand the words of our saviors, I am touched. I would gladly read the lives of Plutarch, or the histories of Herodotus, or even general history of our country, military, etc. But although I enjoy the ancient stories, and get excited by Homer, they're still not the same for me. The closest I have ever come to being touched by a religious text is when reading certain hymns to the gods, particularly the Homeric ones. Even then, though I always thank and ask blessings from all the goddesses who rule on earth, above, and below. Athena, Hermes, and Aphrodite. I tried, several times, to get close to Hestia, but for whatever reason, it never worked out. Compounding all of this is the belief, held by some, that one must read and study philosophy in order to truly be considered a Hellenic polytheist. While I have no issue with philosophy in general, and while I did take 2 general philosophy courses in college, my interest in the subject has never really gone past Socrates the man and his methods of questioning, not Plato and the words that he put into his teacher's mouth. Furthermore, I see the philosophers as being part of their own field, not religion, even though some of them discussed the gods. My morals, ethics, and values developed as a result of my personal experiences, observations, and logic, and are now, if anything, being at least partly shaped by our national saviors. I have never looked to religion, not even the sacred works of Homer, Hesiod, Solon, or the Delphic maxims, for guidance. So the idea that it is necessary for me to read not only those, which I greatly respect as moral instructions, but also the views of people with vastly different theologies, and try to incorporate that into my faith, makes no sense to me. I have also been told that Hellenic polytheism is a lifestyle, which I have never understood. I can see being an ethnico-prone nationalist as a lifestyle, in that I hold myself to higher standards of behavior, thought. Perhaps, this is what is meant here as well. It's not that I don't believe in the gods, as I said at the beginning of this essay. I recognize that they are in my life, and that without them, nothing is possible. But I don't incorporate my faith into my general life in the same way as I do modern Hellenic culture. I am willing to be imprisoned, persecuted, and even to die for my country, but not for my religion. This is why, while I do not hide my beliefs, that I could not do so, I would follow it. But if a law was made that I could not celebrate patriotic holidays, study our history, or speak our language, I would protest it openly. The final point that I must make is in regards to the hatred that many of my co-religionists feel toward Christians, and the intensity with which they fight for our religious rights in Hellas. Whether I like it or not, I was born and brought up in America, and have never really come into any serious conflicts with Christians. Certainly nothing life-changing. So I'm sure this has something to do with my views. I have also known many good Christians throughout my life, and while I do hate the ancients, I also recognize that no one living today, on either side, is among them. So I am greatly annoyed when any mention of Christianity is met with contempt, and even things which are not Christian in themselves, are deemed Romeoi by those from Hellas, who do not consider modern Greeks to be Hellenes. As much as it aggravates me that so many non-Greeks who follow the gods have no regard for modern-day Greece, it is at least somewhat understandable. But when native Hellenes talk of our religious rights and freedoms, knowing perfectly well that people are literally dying of starvation and suicide, losing their jobs, living in homes with no heat if they still have homes at all, and having to give their children to orphanages so that they can eat, it makes me downright angry. Their idea of nation is completely different from mine, as theirs is based on the ancient models and mine is based on the modern. Needless to say, we each see our side as correct, and that of our opponents as wrong, and it leads us into debates, even in topics which should be religious in nature. All of this leaves me with mixed feelings. Where do I belong? Can I be a Hellenic polytheist and a nationalist at once? Do I really fit in? Even though I believe in the gods, is it right for me to continue to honor them in the way that I do? If I don't feel as strongly toward them as I do toward my country, why can't I walk away? Do I fear some kind of punishment? If the answer is no, and I believe it is, do I just fear that I will lose the perks that come with believing in them? If I ask for something, it's given, and I give back, then I can ask for something else? Am I afraid that, if something bad happens, say an illness or bad setback in my life, that I won't have anyone to whom I could turn if I give up my faith in the gods? And are any of these good reasons to continue honoring them? If this is not the right path for me, then what is, or am I better off with none for the time being? I cannot answer these questions. But writing this out has helped me clear my mind, if nothing else. Maybe, that's the first step on the road to understanding.